We certainly cannot look at this current pandemic and not grieve over people who are dying and people who are sick, and hospitals that are overflowing, and first responders who are going 24/7. But there's also another aspect of this that is also very serious, and that is the economic troubles that are quickly expanding and happening. So many people losing their jobs. The government is trying. I think they're probably doing as much as we could expect them to do, given the nature of politics, to try to help small business people, to help everybody, with our own money, by the way, our own tax money. But yeah, it's a very difficult thing on our economy. And I'm very aware that there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of ministries out there, both very large and, like Linda and I, very small, that depend completely on the generous giving of people just like you. And you probably support many ministries. Some of you who are watching support us and our work around the world in training young leaders and providing them with free materials in the poorest countries. And I want to say something about giving, charitable giving, church giving. And I understand, I was a pastor for 25 years. I understand what it costs to keep a typical current model church going. It's expensive. We have to believe that the outcome of it is generally good. Maybe, sometimes maybe not, but it's expensive. There's no doubt about it. And everybody that depends on giving, be it individuals in missions, be it large missionary groups, or being local churches, everybody is suffering, and it's going to get worse. But it's because each of us in our own personal families, we're suffering. And you hear me say this in other situations. I'm going to say it again, and that is, look, if you can't, if you're doing everything you can to feed your family and you're struggling to do that, then don't send us anything this month. And because we're both trusting God, your family, my family, we're trusting God in this, and we're trusting Him to be our provider. But Paul understood this. The church in Jerusalem was in the midst of a terrible famine, and they were also in the midst of an ongoing battle with the Roman government. And so because of that, the Christians in and around Jerusalem were suffering terribly. Many of them had begun to starve to death. And you say, well, where was God? Well, let's understand that to be absent from the body is to instantly be present with the Lord. And I just want to suggest that maybe they looked at death slightly different than we do, because death is supposed to be a graduation for us. But that doesn't help the grieving process of the people who are left behind. But people were starving, believers were starving in and around Jerusalem. And so Paul was collecting money from the Gentile churches that were not suffering in the same way. And then he was going to take it back to Jerusalem. And here's what he had to say about giving, both to charitable causes, I think to the local church, all of that. Here's what he had to say. And here is my advice. 2 Corinthians 8, beginning in verse 10. 2 Corinthians 8, beginning in verse 10. And here is my advice about what is best for you in this matter. Now, context. If you back up a few verses, he's talking about giving. This whole chapter nearly is about giving. Last year, you were the first not only to give, but also to have the desire to do so. In other words, they were the first church that said, we're eager to give, and they had begun to give. Now, verse 11, finish the work, so that your eager willingness to do it may be matched by your completion of it according to your means. They were excited about it. They were eager to do it. And now Paul says, finish what you promised. Do what you said, but do it according to the means that God has provided now. And then he even goes on and he says, for if the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. Now, simple. I mean, really, really simple. Give when you have it to give. Give when it's not going to cause your children to go without food or clothing. Give what you can. God's acceptance and delight in our giving, Paul says, is when we give according to what we have, not what we don't have. Now that may sound like, simple logic, but again, all of us who are out there ministering, and because we're ministering full time, all the time, we depend on the giving of other people in the family of God who don't go, but they give so we can go. And that's biblical. That's God's plan. But in times of crisis, you give out of what you have and don't feel bad about that. Don't feel condemned if you cannot give this month. Please don't. And I pastors, understand my heart when I say this. But if all you can do is give a little to your local church, give it. Give it with joy. And know that even though you wish you could give more, God does understand. Now, granted, if this causes someone to be selfish or greedy and just want to spend on themselves just because they need a bigger TV right now and they're on sale, you've got a different problem. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about a God who understands everything about what we have and what we don't have. He understands about what the needs are. And in understanding that, he is delighted, he is happy when we give based on what we have to give and don't feel condemned that we don't have more. When God blesses you with more, give more. Absolutely. But until then, no condemnation. This is a no condemnation zone in Jesus' name.